This is the history of cell phones by Christian, Jonathan, and Kirkland. Ever since this guy, Alexander Graham Bell, invented the first phone in 1876, there has been a want for mobile phones. Almost a century later, Martin Cooper, on April 3rd, 1972, made the first ever recorded call from a mobile phone. This Motorola Dynotac was what Cooper used in 1972. It weighed about 2.5 pounds, took 10 hours to completely charge, and allowed about 30 minutes of talk. It cost about $4,000, which is about $9,000 in today's money. The cell phone market took off from there. Fast forward 25 years later, Motorola came out with the first ever flip phone, known as the MicroTac. And then 4 years after that, in 1993, the IBM Simon became the first ever smartphone, paving the way for companies like Samsung and Apple today. Now, before we move on to smartphones the way we know them today, there were many more technological advances still to come. Some of these advances include the first ever cell phone with a full QWERTY keyboard called the Nokia 9000. Then came the first cell phone with internet access in 1998, known as the Nokia 7110. A few years later, the first cell phone with a camera came out in 2002, and finally came the Motorola Razr, an ultra-thin cell phone that was vastly popular before the age of the smartphone. Some of you might be wondering, how does a cell phone work? In the most basic form, a cell phone is essentially a two-way radio consisting of a radio transmitter and a radio receiver. When you chat with your friend on your phone converts your voice into an electrical signal, which is then transmitted via radio waves to the nearest cell tower. The network of cell towers then relays the radio wave to your friend's cell phone, which converts it back to an electrical signal and then back to sound again. In the most basic form, a cell phone works just like a walkie-talkie. Since the early 2000s, the cellular infrastructure grew from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G, and companies like BlackBerry and Palm took their turns as industry leaders. Then, in 2007, Apple introduced the first iPhone. A few years later, Google and Samsung introduced their versions of the smartphone. In the years to follow, the smartphone became ubiquitous and even more like computers. Today, cell phones are everywhere, engulfing our society and changing the world, and it's even said that there are more mobile phones than the human population. In recent years, the purpose of the cell phone has shifted from verbal communication tool to a multimedia tool. We now use our cell phones more for surfing the web, checking email, snapping photos, and texting, and updating our social media statuses more than actually placing calls. The Apple iPhone is the most commonly used smartphone today. With a camera as clear as a point-and-shoot camera, and graphics and processors as fast and strong as a computer, it is safe to say that smartphones are the way of the future. However, with all these positives has to come some negatives with cell phones. The biggest issue regarding cell phones in today's society is that they are a huge distraction. They are a distraction at work, on the go, and especially while driving. First of all, driving and texting has become a huge epidemic across the world that needs to be addressed. Secondly, it is not uncommon to see a group of friends all sitting around a table, staring at their screens instead of engaging with each other in conversation. These are issues of a vastly expanding technological advances in the cell phone industry, and some people think it is just going to get worse in time. Now that we have discussed the history and positive and negative effects of cell phones on today's society, let's look ahead to the future and see what the cell phone industry has in store. With the cell phone industry changing and developing so rapidly in the past decade, it seems as though almost anything you can imagine is possible for the future. Some experts say these devices will take over all other electronic devices, including computers and televisions, while others believe the cell phone will become more intact with our senses and biological reflexes, such as eye movement and thought processing. For the future, the question isn't how will we change the cell phone, it is how will the cell phone change us? Thank you for listening in. I hope you have a much better understanding of the history of cell phones, as well as how they're affecting the world today and what to expect for the future. See you next time.